Ravnica Allegiance is a great limited environment, by far the best set of 2019, and I want to share with you the super secret recipe to winning with each guild. We'll run through the game plan for each, their strengths and shortcomings, and the overall game plan for any limited event you jump into. Let's get into it. We're going to start with my wife's favorite guild, Orzhov. They are a well-rounded guild with a great mechanic for limited in Afterlife. Strengths include great early game plays like Ministrant of Obligation, Orzhov Enforcer, Imperious Oligarch, and Pitiless Pontiff, and some of the best removal in the set. Look to grab all the copies of cards like Final Payment, Mortify, and Grotesque Demise possible. Weaknesses would be Orzhov's mid to late game, where you may find the guild struggling to match the big, powerful threats of other guilds, especially large flying threats that chew up your Afterlife tokens. I found some nice success with stall breakers using enchantments like Angelic Exaltation, which feels seriously underrated. On a wide board, every creature is now a powerhouse, and it still allows you to benefit from pacifism effects your opponent may use, like Sky Tether or Lawmage's Binding. It makes your early plays far more formidable and synergizes so well with Lifelink, Menace, Afterlife, and Death Touch. Then there's everyone's favorite card to play against, Ethereal Absolution, which basically means you win the game. Game plan is typically having a lower curve with a focus on going wide, attacking, and then being happy to trade creatures to take full advantage of Afterlife, keeping the pressure on your opponent. You absolutely must have removal for this deck to close out games and deal with those big creatures that will eat any of yours, having Afterlife or not. Slow and steady wins the death race, as they say. Actually, no one says that, but maybe now they will. Some splashing solutions to make sure your deck is really well-rounded would be more removal going into Rakdos and Azorius, as well as even more evasive or direct damage cards, and of course you can always pick up some more flying threats. All around, I really like Orzhov. Next is my personal favorite in Simic. I've also found this guild to be rather well-rounded, but it prefers a grind fest to take full advantage of their mechanic, Adapt, and all the fun +1/+1 counter synergies going on in this guild. Strengths are crafting crazy creations like oozes and flying jellyfish if you're lucky with the cards you pull, or just some ridiculous yet fairly strong common and uncommon spells like Shark to Crab and Galloping Frog lizards. Scuttlegator approves. Simic's biggest weakness is how slow it can be, and them just wanting to get to the mid to late game without too much pressure. Being overrun by a wide board was always my greatest fear in playing Simic. Simic Ascendancy means you have non-stop counter synergy funsies, especially when combined with Wilderness Reclamation, which is just dumb, even in limited. Also, look to the uncommon spot for some great 1/1 counter synergy cards with Trollbred Guardian, Skatewing Spy, and of course the Galloping Lizrog. It always feels nice to keep mana up for Adapt, but then be surprisingly disruptive with a card like Frilled Mystic as well. Flyers are often difficult to deal with in green, although blue gives you plenty of options, but answers for your opponent's big flying threats can be found with cards like Tower Defense, Sagittarius Volley, and Gift of Strength. One strength of Simic 2 is that you can always save your mana to adapt or keep it up to cast those instant spells, so you will most likely always have an option to use your mana, especially into the late game. Use this to your advantage, and of course, my personal favorite is maximize the mind games. Stabilize, grind, and adapt to your heart's content. Win with monsters, or win with flying bodies, or win with monster flying bodies. Seemingly everyone's least preferred guild, yet the one I've won the most with, is Azorius. I've really enjoyed this guild, even if their new mechanic is rather mundane and sometimes counterintuitive. Addendum. But make no mistake, Azorius flat out just has strong cards. Best common in the set is owned by Azorius with Lawmage's Binding, and has other incredibly efficient yet powerful gold cards with their Senate Guildmage, Azorius Knight Arbiter, and Azorius Skyguard. Strengths, we've got flyers for days at all stages of the game. We also have ways to clear the skies for our attackers with semi-removal like Slimebind, Sky Tether, Summary Judgment, and Unbreakable Formation is just a ridiculously good card if you have anything resembling a decent board state. Heaven help your opponent if you splash in Trollbred Guardian or Zagana to then give all your now pumped up, potentially indestructible, vigilant, basically merciless creatures trample as well. Weaknesses I would put as Azorius being the least beginner-friendly guild because of the mechanic leading to players potentially making somewhat suboptimal plays, or not being able to save their spells for the most opportune time. Azorius is also a bit scattered in that it has a lot of cards that do a lot of things, but it only has a couple options. For example, if you want tempo, you got a couple options. Counters, again, a couple options. Mill, yep, here's 2 cards. If you want to go for defender or high toughness shenanigans, running with high alert, actually, wait, that seems pretty sweet. If you can pull off a high alert deck, they're legit, they're awesome, you get 2 thumbs up from me. Point is, it can just be difficult to build a deck and find your focus, find your win condition, and build a deck that operates consistently. Game plan's pretty simple: fly over your opponent and win with constant flying threats, and remove or lock down anything you can't push through. If you don't want to go into the flying strategy, High Alert allows you to take your defensive creatures and make them into huge offensive threats. Dovin's Acuity allows you to really win any grind fest as well through card advantage and life gain. Oh, and of course, splash into Orzhov or Simic if you need more removal options, more big bodies, or sky clearing / sky filling cards. Now for the general top tier guild, when it came to sealed, we have Gruul. Their mechanic Riot means they're not stuck being this super aggro one-dimensional guild, but they can also lean towards just focusing on really overpowering their opponent. They also work in some 1-1 counter synergies and have been given tools to run away with the game at just about any time. Being green and red means their strengths come from constantly applying pressure by consistently playing big threats. Using haste from Riot can prevent our opponent from getting too comfortable, and the 1-1 counters can really help live up to the slogan written on every welcome mat of their beautiful homes. Not Gruul, then die. Cards like Burning Tree Vandal can help us find answers for threats on the board, or Clamor Shaman can just allow us to ignore those threats altogether. We can use Riot to get counters on our Frenzied Arnix, Zertal Goblin, Gruul Beastmaster, and Rampaging Rendhorn, and then playing Rumbling Ruin or Trollbred Guardian to really close out a game is nothing to shake a stick at. Gruul also has some solid removal or trick options to remove any threats trying to get in your way. Our biggest weakness though is our removal or tricks that can be interrupted by instant speed or bounce or kill spells and don't really help us get around death touch creatures, which our opponents are probably going to be running if they're in a different guild. So there's some downside or risk with Gruul's removal, generally speaking, but we have some of the best creatures, we have a lot of trample, so look to dominate the board early and often and just crush it. Look to splash in crazy counter synergies with Simic cards, or make up for the lack of instant speed, unconditional removal with Rakdos. Speaking of Rakdos, here's our final guild to review. I think they have the most interesting mechanic of the set in Spectacle, and they have no shortage of damage options or removal, but its line to victory usually comes in two ways. First is going all in on their strength as a super aggro guild, playing cards like Fireblade Artist to send over consistent damage, and closing out a game just before an opponent can stabilize. This more aggro approach is riskier, but can also be quite difficult to stop if we get multiple damage sources like Vindictive Vampire, Ill-Gotten Inheritance, couple that with some nice sack outlets like Footlight Fiend, Gutter Bones, and really any Afterlife creatures, and then bring in whatever you need back with Dead Revels. It can win the race against any guild and can be more aggressive than even Gruul, with their damage not necessarily having to come from attacking creatures. My second and preferred way to play is to steer Rakdos towards a mid-game control and burn game plan, play early threats and then slow your opponent down with a lot of removal, splash into white for more afterlife options, more life gain and evasive threats, and then use your red spells to always have enough cards or damage to not worry about falling behind. Seek out creatures with menace to make blocking difficult for your opponent, give you the opportunity for greater blowouts as well. Basically, less insanity for the opportunity to cause more calamity. Here we aren't as worried about not having a blazing start, we can answer bigger threats from our opponent, and though we aren't helpless after the mid game, we still need to close out a game sooner than later. Weaknesses for our aggro strategy is being aggressive, can be quite resource intensive, and make us unable to recover from a suboptimal draw or quick answers from our opponent. Any stumbling on our part can cause us to fall helplessly behind. Opponent's life gain is also the bane of our existence. Rakdos has all kinds of removal, but if you need more, look to Orzhov, or if you want more pressure or bigger bodies, look into Gruul. Both of these guilds offer cards that are really complementary to Rakdos' playstyle as well, so don't be afraid to splash. Alright, now time to rank the guilds. In first place, and I think this is going to be contentious, but I have Azorius. I find the format being grindier, control reigns supreme, and Azorius has so many options that you can build around and make strong and consistent draft decks. Esper seems to be the strongest combination as well, splashing in extra removal or better threats. Overall, I just really like Azorius. Second, I have Orzhov, again because Esper is such a strong deck. I think that they can curve out well, they can put a lot of pressure on the board and win through enchantments that aren't often planned for, like Angelic Exaltation. They can remove other stuff, they have so much good removal, it's just a really strong guild. Third, I have Simic because they can stabilize and win most of the long games. Their greatest weakness is a wide board though, outpacing them. Overall, adapting creatures can really have a lot of power and help you win any close games. Fourth, I have Rakdos because I just enjoy this guild, but I find them having consistency issues which have plagued me far too often. Life gain just ruins us, and usually you get stabilized against and then overrun even if you take a big advantage early on. I do like the guild, it has very creative lines to victory, but I still think this guild is not going to be the top choice more often than not unless you just start off with some really strong bombs or strong duplicates that improve your deck's overall consistency. And then I actually have Gruul as the weakest guild for draft. For sealed, it's much stronger, but in draft, I think it's just too linear. It's too one-dimensional. Even though Riot is great, it's a fantastic implementation of the mechanic that stays true to the color wheel. However, I've just found Gruul to be the least flexible, the least able to adapt to an opponent that can deal with a few big threats early on, and then just take control of the game through evasion and win that race. Even though I find them the weakest, I think any guild can beat any guild. You can win a draft with any guild. Overall, it's going to depend on your strategy, your ability to adapt in the game, and really make the most of the cards you have. So what do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below. That's our draft guide for Guilds of Ravnica Allegiance. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you can, it would really help me out by subscribing for more content like this, liking the videos to help those that like the same content find me in the abyss that is YouTubing, and of course, thanks for watching. Best of luck at your drafts and sealed events. May your pulls be top tier and your top decks be insane. We'll see you in the next video.